Are you struggling to create an intentional headspace, unable to connect deeper with yourself? Come, and together let's address the elephant in the room. I'm your host, Sinead Roche, and this is the Uncomfortable Podcast. When I was growing up, I felt the need to compensate for the fact that I was usually one of the biggest people in the room, for my age, basically. And I always made sure to have the biggest personality in the room. And it's because I really just wanted people to, avoid kind of looking at me and just find me funny or just find me charming in some sense. And even though I've worked on kind of my body image to this day, I still sometimes feel the need to compensate in a room or compare myself sometimes in a room. And I still sometimes even have issues with like being in tighter clothes. And that's just something that I still struggle with. But we are learning and we are growing. Moreover, also growing up, I've felt sometimes really stupid. I think especially in comparison to my older brother. When we were growing up, oh my goodness, he's someone who's naturally smart. And naturally smart people, they're lucky as hell. Not to say that, he at one point didn't have to start working for his intelligence, but I think genuinely when we were younger, I did always feel a bit lacking, especially in comparison to him. And so in order to compensate for the fact that, I wasn't in courses such as math, physics, or anything STEM really related, I wasn't as good as him. I compensated by getting some of the more, not weird, I don't want to say weird, but definitely some of weirder achievements, and getting a lot of plaques or certificates or competing a lot in contests that no one's really heard of. I did national national German debating in all of North America. Who does that? Really, who even finds that shit out? And I have plaques from that, or I've done impromptu speech or debate or best speech, kind of a lot of talking, basically, competitions. And I did that just because I wanted to feel that other people see that I am smart enough, basically. And yes, I think especially in comparison to my brother, I really just wanted to also show that I know he's good in this, but I'm good too, I'm good too. And I think even today, just this fear that I'm not good enough in intelligence wise also sneaks up to me when I'm contemplating doing a PhD, because I just want people to know that I'm intelligent and there's something in my mind, even though I am quite aware that even despite the achievements, the plaques, I am good enough. All of this to say that I have insecurities. And this was really uncomfortable to tell everyone just now. But I feel safe enough to do so because I want you to feel safe enough to address this. And I think it's something that everyone has to address, because honestly, I've never met somebody even going into their older years. I've even spoken to people who are in their 80s and there's something that they're still a bit insecure about. And it's not something that rules their life though necessarily. I feel the way that insecurities can tend to show up and rule our lives when we're a bit younger. But it's still something that they're not 100% secure in. And with that said, I just haven't met anyone who still doesn't need some type of reassurance on something, or someone who doesn't get defensive when you hit a sensitive topic, or someone who 100% feels they don't lack anything in comparison to another person, even on a smaller level. And I know when people talk about insecurities, the piece of advice that they always hear is, just love yourself. Just learn to accept yourself. Bitch, if I thought it was that easy, don't you think I would have done that shit by now? Don't you think I would be fucking through the roof with confidence and just moving with no care in the world? obviously it's not that fucking easy to just love yourself, like, out of your flaws and accept them all at once. Like, and I think especially as a woman, do you know we've been socialized to hate ourselves, socialized and taught to compare to every other woman in the room, and just to constantly analyze if there's something wrong with us, and you think it's gonna be easy to just love myself? Be so fucking for real. And while I'm not here today to teach you how to love yourself properly like this, I think if you've listened to like my episodes in the past from season 1, my idea on self-love, or like, I guess my view on it, is a bit strange. And so that's not also something that I'm here to teach necessarily, but I am here to give you the tools today to address how to cope with like your reactions to your triggers on insecurities that you have still. Because I think when, again, like, you build up these tools, basically you're able to help yourself like kind of understand more what's going on with you. And in that sense, you start to figure out that, like, hey, maybe it's not really that bad, or hey, maybe I don't really have a realistic view on myself. Maybe I can learn to adapt that. And through that, I think you can then like learn to accept yourself and learn to appreciate yourself, and yes, learn to love yourself. But this episode today will not be just on like, oh my gosh, if you do like a few skincare routines, then you're really just gonna love your overall appearance. Bitch, no. Sorry, I don't mean to cuss that much, but like, I've heard that so often. And I think just growing up, especially, like, yeah, as the bigger person in the room usually, I hate hearing that. I really hate hearing that. And so I'm not about to tell you that it's like easy or simple. And any progress that I have made in terms of any insecurity that I've had, with my biggest one definitely being how I look, has taken a good 8 to 10 years for me to even stop doing like certain like negative habits. Like, I'm not even there fully 100% with like learning how to flip it and appreciate myself. But we're going to get into that. And I'm definitely going to show you, and explain what has helped me. And hopefully it helps you. And so with that said, let's get into what it means to have an insecurity. And I don't mean in terms of what it means to be insecure, because just because you feel like you lack something does not mean that you are lacking overall. And I think that's something that you definitely need to understand, that there are just smaller aspects, that sometimes you're a bit more sensitive about, but that doesn't mean that who you are as a person is wrapped up all in this one aspect, even if it feels like, you'll never be 100% like amazing if you don't have this part of you like at that level that you want it to be at as well. But it's just a part that you maybe feel like, you just wish it was a bit different. And so that to that end, an insecurity is a feeling of inadequacy, self-doubt, or anxiety, like regarding your abilities, your appearance, or might even show up like in your relationships. It can be the fear that, people don't like you. I've had that one. Financial insecurity. I have that one. Performance insecurity. Insecurity within your relationship. Body image insecurity. That's something I constantly fight. And when you have one, basically, because your body tells you that, your thinking processes tell you that. So maybe when it comes to these topics, you start to overthink a bit about it. Did people notice that, like, for example, if you think that like you're insecure about the way you smell, maybe then you're constantly thinking, okay, like, let me not get too close to this person. Let me not like, talk to them too closely. Oh, do they think I smell bad maybe? Or like, did they walk away from me because, they weren't interested in me, or is it because I smell bad? So basically you overthink this aspect of yourself. Then you can be a bit more aware of this because of how your body language like reacts basically when the topic comes up. Or oftentimes what I find myself doing a lot is like, I vocally remind myself of my inadequacy, which we've been working on, okay? And then another way that you might have insecurity is like, you might be constantly seeking for reassurance. And this is like, if you've ever been in those rooms where someone is always like, oh, but I'm so fat and ugly. Like, I get what that feels like. And then, you want everyone kind of around you to reassure you. And that reassurance is nice to some degree, but it doesn't cure the end, like the at heart, the problem of why you have that insecurity to begin with. But it's just another way that you know that like you're kind of insecure about something, for example. And I think for me recently, what's become an insecurity of mine as an adult is financial insecurity. And so I know that I have an insecurity with this because whenever the topic comes up, I get so tense. Money makes me a bit tense. And in order for me to kind of like, I guess, get through my reaction of it, or normalize it a bit more for myself and become a bit more realistic with like the expectations that I have for myself financially as a 21-year-old, is I talk about it a bit more. And I have a lot of friends who I'm really grateful for that I can talk about money with, because I know it's a sensitive subject, and we're definitely going to be having an episode on money once again, like I've had one in the past. But yeah, this is just an insecurity of mine as well that I am recently finding out. And unfortunately, as you grow older, you might develop new ones as well, because you're experiencing different situations where new insecurities might arise. And no, that's not what anyone wants to hear. But it's important that you also understand that you can minimize the reaction to it, and you can start to understand a bit more about yourself through it, and in hopes that you can actually flip the script just a bit more. But let's get into why we even have kind of like insecurities to begin with. I think a lot of them do tend to start off like when we are younger. Maybe you were bullied about a certain aspect of yourself. Maybe through social media influence, you kind of like have this idea that like you're supposed to look a certain way, or you should be doing something at this point in your life. Then there's also like growing up in capitalistic societies, like everything is targeted towards like you having an insecurity about something. And so basically it kind of makes you more aware about things that you didn't think you had to be aware about, and that you didn't think you had an issue with to begin with, but all of a sudden you do for some reason. And then past experiences of like rejection from people, failed attempts of doing something, or just feelings of I'm not good enough, like overall, is part of the reason I feel like a lot of us develop these insecurities basically. And then sometimes oftentimes when we rely on like external validation, when everything that's been said to us externally has come from such a negative point of view, we're also going to adopt that as well. And so it kind of just leaves a wound on you, and it takes so much to clean that wound up, make sure you don't pick on it basically, or pour alcohol over it. But it's something that I think a lot of us continuously reopen and don't even know properly how to address. And if I'm being honest, I cannot tell you one single thing right now where I'm 100% at I've built myself up and I feel great when we talk about something. And that's completely normal. But I can tell you I'm like at 85% of the way with like a lot of my past insecurities. And I feel really confident as a person in general, because I've learned to appreciate a lot more about myself than I have in the past. But even I cannot tell you that I'm at 100%. And that's okay. Certain things, they're always going to be a bit more sensitive to us, but we can learn how to cope with our reactions a bit better. And that's what we're going to do today and talk about a bit more. And what I do want to preface before I get into this, though, is that what I think keeps our insecurities alive and really like present is how we speak about ourselves and how we talk to ourselves when it comes to these insecurities. And that's something I'm definitely going to address as well, because I think that is basically, when you're scratching at a wound, every single time we get triggered, how we react like within also impacts us even more, and like kind of just deepens the wound and keeps it alive. And I'm going to explain that as we move on. But that's just something I want you to think about if you haven't thought about already. There's a difference between like how the world is already impacting that view on this insecurity that you have or something. But then, realizing how you also continuously put yourself basically in a place where like you don't even see, where you only see basically how bad something is about you, or like how much you lack, is something that also needs to be definitely addressed in order for us to be able to cope better and have a better, like, I guess, reaction and a better toolbox with tools, so that we know, how to actually build ourselves up next time we get a bit insecure or feel a bit triggered. And so, as I said, I think everyone kind of like has an insecurity in some way, in some sense. And what I want you to ask yourself right now, and I'm going to reflect through my kind of reaction inventory, but ask yourself, what do you do when you get triggered? Like, what does that actually look like? Because I think you need to know what your triggers actually are. Like, if you cannot definitively tell me right now what you're insecure about, great. Good for you to some degree, but please do know it kind of does show up sometimes in how you and when you get defensive. And so for me, like I explained before, I know personally like what's going on internally or physically when I feel insecure, but especially when I'm in conversations with people, like when I get triggered, I get defensive as hell. I get defensive. You will not come and fucking attack me. I will come and attack you real quick. But I'm working on that. I am really working on that. I also have this tendency to say that, like, especially when I'm talking about something where I've been insecure about it in the past, I have this, I guess, automatic response in my mind that you're going to say something. So I always tell someone, I'm like, before you say blah, 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 let me tell you this. And it's already going in with the intention that you have something bad to say about me. And also with that, I overexplain a lot. Like I know I'm triggered by something, or I know an insecurity of mine has been touched on when I feel the need to overexplain, so to defend myself. And sometimes what I also do when I know, or like, this is just another sign that like an insecurity of mine is being talked about right now, is I love to say something bad about myself in hopes that someone will say like the opposite, and hopes that that external validation will make me feel 100% again. Or not again, but for once, but their validation never feels as good, even though I really want it. But that's just something I'll do sometimes. And also, like I mentioned, I usually get really tense. Sometimes I also play things off with a joke, or if I'm really in big social settings, I get really quiet when these topics come up. But in other settings, I get really aggressive, like I was saying, and it's all just a coping mechanism. And I'm trying to just protect myself basically, because I've been hurt, and I've been hurt for these reasons, and so I don't want you to come and hurt me anymore. And so I will hurt you back, which is not what we want to do. And, I will say that I've gotten better at not attacking people, but I definitely am still defensive. Oh my gosh, I'm still defensive a lot of the times. But yeah, progress to some degree. And if right now, you've heard my reaction inventory, if you can relate to any of this, first of all, take a moment, pat yourself on the back, because it's really hard to admit to yourself that you get defensive, and it's really hard to admit that you get defensive because you have insecurities. And I think especially if you're someone who has an ego, which I do too, I'm glad that you were able to dismantle it for some time and be honest with yourself. And I hope that this is a space where you feel like you can be honest with yourself, because I right now am trying to be really honest with you guys, and honest with myself also. And I know it's a bit just uncomfortable, because obviously, or not obviously, but oftentimes I would really like to walk into the world feeling like I am 100% protected and nothing can hurt me. But I know a lot can hurt me, and a lot has hurt me. And it's just really important to understand your reactions towards that. And that it's really just coming from, a place that you want to protect yourself. And I guess my hope is that as we acknowledge, you know, that we want to protect ourselves, that we still do have like these scars and these wounds that still need to heal, like we also open our minds up to the possibility that we don't necessarily need to protect ourselves all the time, and that the world isn't trying to hurt us, and that we don't need to continue to hurt ourselves as well. But we will hopefully get through that and, you know, kind of understand a bit more about ourselves. And I think really the only way that we're going to be able to move forward with our insecurities, move forward and kind of get better at our reactions, or like maybe not have the reactions necessarily, is by kind of dismantling like our insecurities. And I think I'm not saying we be 100% positive. Hell no. Okay, I'm not saying let's go 100% to the opposite way. What I am saying right now is let's become realistic, because I think, and like realistic about who we are. Because whenever like you are talking about something that you're insecure about, right? Basically, you already have these kind of mental mind maps in your mind about what you think about yourself and what kind of feeling you have associated to it, or what the belief is associated to it. And this is like all about your schemas, basically. And what you try to do, which is really natural, is you try to reconfirm the idea that you already have in your mind. And the way you're going to do this is by constantly picking out examples of when something basically confirms this bias that you have. So if, for example, you think that you are 100% of the time ugly, then you will literally like make mental pictures and take mental memories and moments of, you know, instances where you felt like that, and you'll make sure that you kind of solidify them in your mind, and that kind of confirms this bias and confirms this insecurity once again. And I think, though, that's not us having a really realistic view on ourselves, or that's not even giving us a fighting chance, because you're naturally going to try to find something that confirms the bias that you already have. And so it's a lot of effort, but it does work out in the sense that when you kind of expand that there's other like times and other moments where like actually, you know, that insecurity that you have is being seen in a positive light, or maybe you're not actually lacking, when you can highlight that and put that also into your mental storage and really confirm it, I think that then allows you to have more of a realistic view, which then allows you to accept where you are at and not just see it as something that you are constantly lacking. But before we get into how to do that, one thing that I want you to ask yourself is, when it comes to certain insecurities, do you want to change this part of yourself, or do you just want to learn to accept it? And I do believe that you can learn to accept yourself without changing yourself, but I have often found that to really redevelop how you view yourself and kind of reconfigure this mental schema, it also means taking actions for yourself as well. But why I want to talk about this specifically is because there's a big difference between doing something for yourself versus doing it for other people. And I say this because we know that the reason why we have lots of insecurities is oftentimes because of external forces that have an impact on how we view ourselves. And if we want to change ourselves, that's great, but do it for you. Because what ends up happening is, if you do actually change yourself because you want to change how other people view you, that feeling of like, oh, now I like really love myself, or really I accept myself, that doesn't fucking happen. And I can give you a great example from my life. When I was younger, I was fat. Can still be considered that a bit today, but who cares, you know? But I grew up fat, and I was pre-diabetic at one point. And I remember my dad sat me down. And he told me that if I don't change my actions soon, I'm going to lose a leg. You know, I could lose a leg potentially, you know, might have to change like a lot of things about my lifestyle and whatnot. But I could, you know, seriously cause harm to myself. And I didn't care. Or not that I didn't care. Like, the moment when he said that, it was scary. But what ended up having me like lose a lot of weight was actually the fact that my crush at the time told me that I was fat, basically. And I ended up getting really skinny at one point, and I still hated myself, you know? And it was only afterwards, like when I started lifting more for strength versus then to be skinny, because I really want to be strong, that I first of all started to really like myself, and I did those actions for myself and not because of someone else. What I really want to highlight here is that I ended up being able to change myself and ended up being able to change this insecurity, but I still hated myself, still didn't get the feeling that I wanted, still didn't feel confident, because I was doing it for someone else and not for me. So there's a really big difference. So between doing something for you for you versus changing you for someone else. So if you go into this with the mindset that you are going to, change yourself because now this other person might like you or these people might respect you, honey, it might gain their respect, but you're not going to respect yourself. And you're going to feel that. And that sense of accomplishment that you thought you were going to have, it's not really going to exist too much. But maybe this is something, again, that you cannot avoid, learning like through your own experiences, which sucks. But maybe this is just something that we all kind of have to go through. And eventually we come to the realization that, shit, man, you gotta really do it for you. You really gotta do it for you in order for it to actually have like a change or an impact on your confidence and how you see yourself. But moreover, let's get into how we can do that right now, and do this exercise that is going to help us to redevelop our schema, whether that be if we want to change ourselves or just learn to accept ourselves. And this exercise will take some time. So if right now you're going to listen to this, that's great. Maybe make a mental note to come back, because I do want you to write this down. I do want you to type this out, or just have this in a space like where you're going to visually see it often. And if you know me, I like making lists, and I love asking questions. And basically what this exercise is all about is learning to understand what you appreciate about yourself. And I know it's a really, really hard task to do, because it genuinely does take a few hours, because you are so naturally conditioned and trained to see what you don't like about yourself that it's so hard to actually see anything positive about yourself and not to then add like a but at the end. But, this can always be better. So what I want you to do is ask yourself first the question, what do you like about what you do as a person? Then ask, what about what you look like? So what do you like about what you look like, basically? Because I think that's always like a big insecurity a lot of people have. Then what do you like about how you interact with others? What do you like about how you interact with yourself? And what about what you do for you? And you can also tailor these questions and make them a bit more like in terms of like the insecurities that you have, maybe. So for like the financial insecurity that I have, I would be like, what do I like about how I spend my money? Or like, what do I appreciate about how I am with money in general? And I know this is really hard to do, again, like I said, because it's just difficult to actually sit down and be like, I can appreciate this about myself, which is so sad when you think about it. Well, that's exactly why you need to do it, because you need to have it like right in front of you, because we oftentimes have only the negative things right in front of us. And what I want you to do is look at this list often, and I want you to put this into your routine somehow so that you are able to remind yourself, and it's not like you're going to feel, that appreciation all of a sudden. It's just that I need you to create mental images and have mental, basically like moments that you can think of where it's like, oh, but I do like this part of myself, or I do appreciate this about myself. And I don't want you to expect that the emotion will come. I just want you to practice seeing it. And so this can also be especially like putting this in places right before like, or right where you know you might get triggered the most. So whether this be on like a mirror, or like for me, right before I open my bank app and I see how much money I've spent, or like how little there might be in there. So it just gets you basically to, kind of remind yourself before you go into a situation where you know you're most likely to get triggered, that like, oh, but there are moments that I really do appreciate this about myself, or this is actually nice on me. And I'm not going to say that's going to outweigh the negatives automatically. But again, you are not often told to practice liking yourself. So it's going to feel weird too. But it's just something you have to kind of start to do, even though it feels silly and unnatural. But it's kind of fucked up that it feels really natural to just hate on yourself most of the time anyways. And I think a really good reason why this is like a good exercise to do is because it allows you to be a bit more like realistic on yourself, like about yourself. And again, just see yourself in a different light. And what I've also done in order to kind of incorporate this exercise a bit more within the insecurities that I have is, like I mentioned, okay, you can tailor the questions a bit more, but you can also get really realistic on, even having like pictures of examples of you doing like the things, not of you doing the things, but like pictures of things that you lack, but where you've actually been showing up, for example. So maybe it's like a picture of you studying. Or for me, when it comes to like my body image, what I have on my phone is like 16 rotating pictures of myself, but from current times. So whenever I take a picture of myself, because I used to do this in the past where I would take pictures of how I like my gym progress, but it ended up becoming really toxic. And now I just have pictures of like when I feel really good, basically, and they're on my screensaver. And I have them there because when I was a girl, when I was younger, I always really wanted to be someone's screensaver and say like, oh my God, they love me so much, but I love me so much. And why would I wait for someone else basically to, kind of see me in that point of view? And I think it's really good that I have this because every single time now that I open my phone, it's like, I'm just met with me. And I'm like, okay, fine shit. Yeah, that's what we like to see. But it basically just lets me, view myself realistically, see who I actually am, who am I talking about right now? Like, if I'm talking about myself negatively, this is who I'm talking about. And I guess because my view of myself is really distorted, again, I can just see it right in front of me. And I'm kind of reminded that I'm like, oh, no, like I look good. What do you even mean? And naturally, like that feeling of insecurity doesn't go away fully just because like, now you have pictures about yourself up, or now you have lists. But like I said, it's just like this thing of practicing and setting yourself up and better so that you can set your view of yourself up better. So this is just like another like quick little tip. And I know it sounds a bit like selfish or just like self-conceited, but again, if we've been taught and conditioned to hate ourselves, then we also need to teach and condition to love ourselves. And I don't think oftentimes, now I see it more frequently that like especially women are being taught to love themselves by themselves, but it's just something that's gonna feel a bit unnatural, and that's very okay. And moreover, if you really want to get into kind of dismantling your insecurity, or just coming to a place where you're a bit more neutral towards it and you don't get like triggered as often, and this step is really, really tedious, then you need to learn how to monitor your thoughts. You need to learn to monitor your thoughts, and especially like monitor what you're saying out loud. And the reason why I say this is because there's a lot of thoughts that you have like that are just passing through your head. Not every single one of them do you need to claim, do you need to go with, and do you need to really like attach to who you are. And so for me, when I start to see myself going down like a negative kind of like doom like thought process basically, what I say to myself is basically, I'm like, no, I realize it's happening, and I will literally say what's going on around the room. Oh, there's a tree there. Oh, there's a book right there. Oh, there's pictures right here. I get my mind off of it, because it's not going to help if I'm picking on a scar that I've had for years with literally freaking alcohol underneath my fingertips, because that's what you do every single time you talk negatively about yourself and you voice it out loud and you just let that just go by really passively. It's like, who trained you and conditioned you? And how are we so conditioned to have that just be our normal automatic setting, to be so negative about ourselves? And so, yes, that's really tedious to do, because it's literally something that you've been trained to do for years, but it is really worth the work. And I think when you actually do even spend like one day monitoring how many thoughts you have about yourself that are really negative, you do start to realize, holy shit, your entire perspective on yourself is warped. But again, this is just something that, like, as you, I guess, see that you're also worth putting in the work for, you start to also just become okay with the fact that, like, yeah, sometimes you really do need to sit down with your thoughts and see, hey, this isn't really working out for us. How can we change the script, or how can we stop it, move on to something else, and yeah, it's tough, but it is definitely worth it. And because, of course, there's so much you can do in order to, basically cope and dismantle your insecurities a bit more, I don't want to continue to go on and leave you guys a bit like feeling that this is going to be so much work, even though you are worth it. But I just want to leave you with two last things. And that's basically that I think, even though, yeah, it's important for us to stop basically the thought that we feel like we're inadequate, it's also important to process it. And the best way that I can say that I've processed in the past is through creatively. So there's times when, like, even like 2 weeks ago in class, I felt really inadequate in terms of my intelligence, especially in comparison to my peers. And I was going to break down crying. And I instead wrote a poem about just feeling inadequate at that time. And I processed it. And if I really needed to, I would have excused myself to go to the bathroom, because, there are going to be those moments that really just hit you. And it's just like, man, I feel this is so impaled, so deep into me, this belief that I'm not good enough. And sometimes you can't just like shut the thought off. Sometimes you also have to feel it. And then you can only feel that by not avoiding it. Pick yourself up, or like kind of write it out. Maybe then relook at that list that you have on yourself. Again, you're not going to feel the emotion of appreciation naturally, but at least that's there, that's fact, and you move forward. And that's basically the other step, or like the other like kind of tip that I have, is when you start to feel inadequate about yourself, again, relook at that list, relook and relive some of the moments that you have written down where you really appreciate yourself, especially when it comes to that insecurity that you're talking about, like, because you're not lacking all the time. You just have it in your mind that you feel like you are. But that's not actually the truth. And we need to become a bit more realistic with ourselves and honest with ourselves. And honesty is not all about criticism. It's also about lifting ourselves up. But people don't teach you that. And that's why we're all stuck basically with as many insecurities as we have. But hopefully that helps in some way. And so, because I know today was like a really long day, or like a really long episode, I want to say, first of all, thank you. Like, I know overcoming an insecurity shit is difficult. It's difficult coping with it, understanding your reactions, writing out what you like about yourself. It's all really hard, but I'm really proud that you're willing to address the topic. I'm even proud that I was able to share some of my insecurities today. And yeah, thank you so much for staying tuned in. And because we want to spread positivity and joy, even though, overcoming an insecurity has nothing really to do a lot with like external validation, I think it is still nice, when people give you kind of like a compliment, and it's really hard, first of all, to accept them sometimes, but it's kind of just nice that someone's like noticed this part about you. And also, it's nice to give compliments, because you just realize like life isn't just all about you, and it's nice to kind of be a source of like helpfulness and joy for other people. And so because today you have a lot of exercises to kind of go through already, what I do want you to do, which I think you can accomplish today, is give someone a compliment, like if possible. Because I know it's going to mean more to them than you know, and you know that, because when you get a compliment, what's that feeling that you kind of have? And I think especially when it comes to, being complimented on your insecurities, it's like, oh my gosh, what do you mean? And I think that just allows people to see that people have like other perspectives as well, and it's not always all negative the way that our perspective is on ourselves with our insecurities. And so I just think that's also just a nice way for you to lift someone else's spirit up. And maybe, if possible, you can even give yourself a compliment today. But I know it's all about baby steps. And so, guys, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. And I hope you guys go through all the exercises. And hopefully you'll let me know how it goes. Bye, guys. Hey guys, thanks so much for tuning into this week's episode of the Uncomfortable Podcast. Make sure to tune in every Monday for a new episode on Spotify and YouTube, and go ahead and check out our TikTok and our Instagram for more content. Bye!